Qatar was an absolute embarrassment, which somehow produced a very exciting race as a result. Welcome to Race Weekend Update. Let's talk about the farce we all just witnessed. Real talk for a moment, there needs to be a temperature limit put in place for races.
I don't feel well, man.
Logan Sargent's literally the only driver fighting for his career right now, and you could hear in his voice that he did not want to retire, but was literally physically incapable of continuing to drive a race car. This guy is incredibly fit. In fact, all of these drivers are in peak physical shape, so you can't just tell them to go do more conditioning. They already did intense physical conditioning for the heat of Singapore. And this was worse. I want to watch racing competitions. I'm not interested in watching who can endure the most heat torture. Between Logan Sargent ending up in the med center and Alonso's car lighting a literal fire under his ass, Formula One is at risk of becoming entertainment on the same level as two drunk guys at a party insisting they could handle being waterboarded, and then things getting out of hand when the shit disturber in the group gets out a towel. And don't get me started on the tires. Just kidding. Get me started on the tires. I want to roast Pirelli, but somehow their ineptitude created for a really exciting and dynamic race. As it turns out, a three-stopper with prescribed tire life is actually quite exciting and creates for a lot more strategy than the one-stop snooze fests we were seeing just a couple years ago. But here's the thing. If this was a close championship fight, people would not have been so accommodating. Let's be honest, if Max didn't walk in his championship on Saturday and instead was in a close title fight with Lewis where they were within a few points of each other, and then Pirelli announced that not only do they need to change the format, but the actual physical track itself, people would be pissed. The camp whose driver won would be happy, and the fans whose driver lost would be calling for the race director's head. Abu Dhabi 2021, anybody? It was completely ridiculous, but we all know why they did what they did. Everyone knew this had the potential to become this generation's 2005 United States Grand Prix. As it turns out, the FIA, unlike Ferrari, is capable of learning from past mistakes. And with flashbacks of Indianapolis 05 in their head, they decided that a hasty track and format change was preferable to most of the grid refusing to race for safety reasons. While I agree with the FIA for the tire situation, I still think they fucked up, because they still should have postponed or canceled the race for safety reasons. Because of the heat. It was just too hot. All of the drivers said it was the worst they've ever experienced. And some of those guys have been driving in Formula One longer than some of the grid has been alive. So this wasn't just some rookies being weak. I haven't even touched on the sprint yet. Well, I'm happy for Oscar cucking Lando. I am left wondering what the hell was the point of that sprint other than to take the wind out of the sails of yet another Max Verstappen championship. 2021 was under ridiculous and controversial circumstances. 2022 happened during an anticlimactic state of confusion. And then in 2023, it happens after an otherwise meaningless sprint. Is this man not allowed to be happy? Did he deny a gypsy a bank loan? Does Daniil Kvyat have a voodoo doll of Max that he uses to make sure that Verstappen has a terrible day every time he wins a world championship? At this point, there have to be supernatural powers involved. And man, oh man, are sprints pointless. Sprints only exist because they get better TV ratings than free practice. Sprints would be more justifiable if they were being used to gather information, experiment with format changes, and to do things that are maybe just for the spectacle, like reverse grid sprints, where they use the quali for both the sessions, and then they do the reverse grid order for the sprint. I want to like them, but they feel like squandered opportunity. It feels like the half-assed lockdowns we did during the Panini, where you get almost all the stress of doing the thing properly with almost none of the benefits. So basically, what I'm saying is they need to either commit or give up on them entirely. And speaking of Canadian failures,
well, you've heard the British guys enough, so why don't you listen to somebody else for a change?
as much as I'd love to talk about how Lance Stroll is an embarrassment, it's Canadian Thanksgiving this weekend, so I'm gonna let him relax on the couch and enjoy some CFL. Instead, I'm gonna rip on Lulu. What a chud! Getting all whiny on the race before it even starts?
Oh, I'm a sitting duck to all these guys.
Is that the champion's mindset that you teach in your masterclass? Jesus face fucking Christ, I'd rather see him chin wagging than filling his visor with all those little bitch tears. Are you not in it to win it? 'Cause George is. Jorpedo may have earned his nickname Osama bin Russell because he yeets it into the corners, but at least he doesn't have the stink of desperation on him the way Hammy Boy does. Hamzy, you need to give your balls such a big tug, you'll be needing a Jill strap for your next race. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming. For the poll of the week, I asked, which team has the strongest pair of drivers? Mercedes, McLaren, or Ferrari? And this is the most damning poll I've done because at the start of the season, it was no question Mercedes. Lewis still seemed to be at the top of his game, and George was the most recent driver to have beaten Max in a race. Nobody else had such a great, proven pair. But this season, McLaren getting their shit together has really allowed for their boy wonders to shine. Piastri winning the sprint and embarrassing Lando was sweeter for me than watching Max take ship number 3. 2023 Max is better than both drivers of almost any team combined, but that doesn't make up for Perez being a boat anchor. So that's why Red Bull, for obvious reasons, didn't make the list. Somebody needs to get Checo a coloring book so he can learn to stay between the lines. And Carlos Sainz has stepped up his game considerably since the summer break, which is the only reason why they're even in this conversation. Mercedes went into this race with 2 cars to Ferrari's 1, thanks to Italian engineering, but Lewis squandered that advantage almost immediately and almost took them both out, which would have completely swung it around the other way to where Ferrari would now have a 1-car advantage over Mercedes in this race, something you absolutely cannot do this close to the end of the season when you're duking it out in a really tight fight for second place in the championship. But Lewis obviously doesn't care about winning the Constructors' Championship, because then he'd have to share with George. And now for the spicy joke of the week. This one came from a friend who shared it in a group chat during the race. Lewis blaming George for the crash immediately after it happened is like a 9/11 hijacker asking, "Why would the World Trade Center do that?" Please join my Patreon.